The sky was quiet, but the air carried a heavy feeling. People looked up, eyes filled with fear and hope. The news was clear. Alien mercenaries were coming. They called themselves the Gralvons. Across many stars their name was spoken with dread. They were soldiers for hire, strong and ruthless. Wherever they went, war followed, and few ever stood against them. In the city of New Haven, people hurried through crowded streets. The world's leaders had sent messages to every country, urging calm and preparation. Military forces gathered, ships readied and soldiers trained, but no one truly believed they could stop the Gralvons. The aliens were far stronger and better armed than humans. At the center of New Haven, a man named Torin sat quietly in his small workshop. Torin was a simple man. He fixed machines and built things from scraps. People called him quiet, maybe a little strange. He didn't speak much and did not mix with crowds, but his eyes held a deep calm, a quiet strength that few noticed. On a small screen hanging on the wall, a news reporter spoke quickly, her voice tense. The Gralvon fleet is just hours away from Earth's orbit. Governments warn citizens to stay indoors and prepare for possible attacks. No negotiations have succeeded so far. The mercenaries demand total surrender. Torin listened, but did not move. His hands rested on a piece of metal shaped like a helmet. It was old and scratched, but carefully repaired. He touched it lightly and looked toward the window, where the sun was setting behind tall buildings. In the military command center far above the city, generals and leaders debated loudly. They spoke of weapons, strategies, and chances to win. Some hoped for peace, others prepared for battle, but all feared the coming storm. A young soldier named Milo paced in the hall. He was full of energy but scared inside. He had trained for years and dreamed of defending his home, but he had never seen anything like the Gralvons. They were like monsters from stories, giants in shining armor with weapons that could burn through steel. Back in his workshop, Torin finally stood. He placed the helmet on a work table next to a large suit of armor. The suit looked old and heavy, made from thick plates of metal. It was not like any modern armor. It was simple, but strong. Torin had built it himself long ago, in secret. No one knew why Torin kept the armor. People thought it was just a hobby, a forgotten project from the past. But now, with the Gralvons coming, Torin's calm seemed strange to some. Outside, the city grew restless. Families gathered in homes, closing doors and windows. Soldiers marched in streets ready for orders. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, and lights flickered on across the skyline. Suddenly, the sky lit up. A bright flash appeared in the night sky. First one, then many. The Gralvon ships entered Earth's orbit. They moved silently, but with power. People watched in horror as huge shadows blocked the stars. The world held its breath. Torin walked to the door of his workshop. He touched the metal suit, feeling its cold surface. He remembered the days when he worked on it with hope and fire. He had trained for battle, but no one had believed him. Now the time had come. The next morning, the Gralvons landed. Huge machines rolled onto the ground, crushing roads and trees. Their soldiers stepped out, tall, armored creatures with sharp weapons. Their eyes shone with cold light. The first fight happened quickly. The soldiers of Earth tried to stop them, but the Gralvons were too strong. They moved fast, breaking through lines like wind through leaves. In the chaos, Torin put on the old armor. It was heavy and stiff, but it fit perfectly. He felt power return to his arms and legs. With each movement, the suit helped him move faster and hit harder. He did not wait for orders. He walked into the city streets, now full of smoke and noise. The Gralvons were taking prisoners and destroying everything in sight. People ran, crying and shouting for help. Torin stopped a group of soldiers who had trapped a family in a building. The aliens laughed, thinking one man in old armor was no threat. But Torin moved like lightning. He punched through a soldier's shield, grabbed another by the arm, and threw him into the ground. His armor clanged with each hit, but he did not stop. The soldiers were shocked. They had never seen a human fight like this. They called for reinforcements, but Torin was already ahead, breaking through their lines. In one moment, he stood alone against 10 Gralvans. They attacked with lasers and heavy weapons, but the armor protected him. He dodged and blocked, then struck back with power. A crowd of humans watched from behind barricades, their eyes opened wide in disbelief and hope. For the first time, someone stood up and fought back, not with machines, but with heart and strength. Torin's moves were not just skill. They were fury and determination. He fought like the entire world was behind him. Slowly, the Gralvans fell, one by one. When the battle ended, Torin stood alone in a silent street. The ground was broken and smoke rose from broken machines. The Gralvan soldiers had fled, leaving behind their weapons and armor. Someone in the crowd shouted, "He's a hero! That man just stopped an army!" News drones flew closer, recording the scene. Torin did not speak or smile. He just looked up at the sky, knowing this was only the beginning. Back in the military command center, leaders stared at the live feed. Faces turned pale. "What? What is that man?" one asked. A general shook his head. "We have no answer, but he changes everything." Far from the city, Torin returned to his workshop. He removed the helmet and sat down. His hands trembled slightly. He was not a hero. He was just a man who had fought for his home, but the world would need him. The Gralvan fleet was still in orbit. More soldiers would come. The war was far from over, and somewhere deep inside, Torin made a promise to himself. No matter what happened, he would fight. Not just for himself, but for every person on Earth. The night grew quiet again. The stars shone faintly behind the dark clouds, and in the silence the future waited, unknown, dangerous, but alive with hope. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when the ground shook beneath the city of New Haven. The sky was still dark, but the noise was loud. Huge ships, like mountains of metal, floated down from the sky. The Gralvans had arrived. People watched. From behind walls and windows, eyes wide with fear. The ships opened like giant flowers, and armored warriors poured out. The Gralvans were tall and strong, covered in heavy plates of shining metal. Their faces were hidden behind helmets with glowing eyes. The air smelled of smoke and oil. The ground trembled as their machines rolled forward, crushing anything in their path. Soldiers of Earth lined up, holding rifles and standing behind shields. They were brave, but many felt small and weak. Torin watched from a hill outside the city. His old armor was ready on his back. The sun's first rays shone on it, making it look like a shield of hope. The Gralvans moved fast. Their weapons fired beams of blue light that cut through walls and metal. Buildings collapsed, and screams filled the air. The soldiers fought hard, but many fell. The battle seemed hopeless. Torin did not wait. He ran down the hill, each step heavy but sure. The sound of explosions followed him like thunder. He passed people running, crying, and shouting for help. He reached a street where the fight was fierce. Gralvans and humans clashed in the dust and smoke. Torin's eyes scanned the scene, looking for those who needed help the most. He saw a group of Gralvans surrounding a small group of children and their parents. The aliens laughed, moving their weapons to threaten the humans. Without a second thought, Torin stepped forward. His armor clanked loudly as he approached. The Gralvans turned, surprised by the sudden arrival of one man in old armor. One alien soldier raised a massive weapon to fire, but Torin was faster. He dodged the beam and charged. His fist hit the alien's chest plate with a loud crack. The soldier staggered back, stunned. More Gralvans attacked, but Torin fought like a whirlwind. He blocked a strike with his arm and kicked another soldier into a broken wall. His movements were sharp and full of power. The humans watched in awe. No one had seen such courage or strength before. Torin fought not just with skill, but with heart. Every punch, every block, showed he would not give up. The battle raged on, but the Gralvans slowly began to fall back. Their weapons were powerful, but Torin's armor protected him well. He was like a force of nature, breaking their ranks as the dust settled. Torin helped the frightened children and their parents to safety. His voice was calm but strong. "Stay behind me," he said. "I will keep you safe." The people followed, eyes full of hope. Torin knew this was only a small victory. The war had just begun, and the Gralvans would not stop until Earth was theirs. He moved quickly to the next fight. Each time, he appeared where the Gralvans were strongest. The aliens grew cautious, whispering among themselves. The stories of the Earth Warrior spread quickly. Meanwhile, in the command centers of Earth, leaders watched the battle unfold. Reports came in. Towns were lost, but in some places, the humans fought back fiercely. General Kieran, a calm and wise woman, studied the images of Torin fighting. She had heard stories of a secret project from years ago, a warrior who could match alien strength. Could he be the one? She wondered aloud. Her officers shook their heads, unsure. The project was said to be a failure, but the man on the screen was real, and he was fighting like no other. Torin's mind was focused. He remembered training long ago, lessons about strength and courage. The armor was heavy, but it made him stronger. It helped him fight not just with weapons, but with will. He moved through the city, saving people, stopping Gralvan patrols. His presence changed the mood. Soldiers began to fight harder, inspired by the one man who stood against the invaders. But the Gralvans were clever. They sent scouts to find Torin's base. They wanted to capture or kill him before he could rally. More resistance. One night, a group of elite Gralvan soldiers approached the workshop where Torin kept his armor. They moved silently, but Torin was ready. He waited inside, suit glowing softly in the dark. When the soldiers broke in, he stood tall and strong. The fight was fierce and fast. Torin's skill and the armor's power surprised the Gralvans once more. The soldiers retreated, leaving behind weapons and injured comrades. Torin knew this was only the beginning. The Gralvans would not give up. The next morning, the city was quiet again. People began to come out of hiding, cleaning streets and helping the wounded. Torin walked among them, tired but determined. A young boy ran up to him, eyes shining. "Are you a hero?" the boy asked. Torin smiled softly. "I'm just a man who wants to protect his home," he said. But the world needed more than words. It needed hope. And Torin was becoming that hope. As the sun rose higher, the Gralvan ships hovered above the planet like dark clouds. The war was far from over, but Earth had found a defender, and Torin was ready to fight. Torin sat alone in his workshop, the soft hum of the city outside barely reaching his ears. The metal suit rested on its stand, shining faintly under the dim light. He touched the cold surface gently, memories stirring deep inside. Long ago, before the Gralvans came, Earth had tried to prepare for wars like this. They knew the universe was full of dangers, and humans were not always the strongest. So, many years back, a secret project was started. It was called Project Stoneblade. The goal was simple but daring: create soldiers who could stand toe-to-toe with the fiercest alien warriors. Machines and weapons were important, but the heart and strength of a human were the true weapons. Torin had been part of that project. He was one of the few who stayed until the end. The others left. The project was called a failure and shut down. The suits were too heavy, the training too hard, and the soldiers too few. Torin was the last. When the world forgot, he did not. Now, with the Gralvans at the gates, that forgotten work was all. that stood between Earth and destruction. Torin's mind drifted back to those days. He remembered long hours of training, running through mud, lifting heavy weights, learning to fight without fear. The suit was more than armor. It was a second skin. It made him faster, stronger, and harder to hurt, but it was also a burden. The suit was heavy and tiring. The world had moved on to new weapons, and no one believed in old ways anymore. Yet now, Torin was glad he never gave up. The workshop door creaked open. A soft voice called out, "Are you ready, Torin?" It was Mira, a young medic who had joined the resistance. She carried a small bag of supplies. Torin nodded, pulling on his helmet. "We don't have a choice. The Gralvans will not stop. We must fight." Outside, the city was quiet but tense. The people waited, hoping for safety. Torin knew their hopes were fragile. He moved to the command center where General Kieran and her team gathered. They had watched Torin's first battle on the news and wanted to meet the man who had changed the war. "Your armor," Kieran said, "is unlike anything we have seen. How did you learn to fight like that?" Torin hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Years ago, this was a secret. I trained for this, but the world forgot. Now, it is all we have." The generals looked at each other, realizing the truth. They needed Torin, but more than that, they needed hope. Plans were made. Torin would lead small teams into enemy territory, using his strength and skill to weaken the Gralvans. The soldiers who fought beside him felt stronger, braver. They believed they could win. The next mission was dangerous. A Gralvan supply base was hidden in the mountains, supplying weapons and troops. If Earth could destroy it, the invaders would lose power. Torin and a small group of soldiers moved quietly through the forest. The trees hid them well. Torin's suit made no sound as he led the way. They reached the base at night. Gralvan guards patrolled with sharp eyes and heavy weapons. Torin studied their movements, planning the attack. "Remember," he whispered. "We strike fast and hard. No mistakes." The soldiers nodded. Fear mixed with excitement. They trusted Torin. At the signal, Torin charged forward. The Gralvan guards turned, surprised by the sudden attack. Torin's fists hit like hammers. He broke through their defenses, smashing weapons and armor. The soldiers followed, firing and taking cover. The base erupted in chaos. Explosions lit the sky as Torin's team planted charges on weapon depots and communication towers. The Gralvans tried to fight back, but their strength could not match Torin's fury. He fought with the skill of a warrior born for battle, each move precise and powerful. In the heart of the base, Torin found the main control room. Gralvan officers shouted orders, trying to organize a defense. Torin broke the door open. The officers froze when they saw him in shining armor. He did not speak. His eyes burned with determination. With a single strike, he disabled their weapons. The control room went dark. Outside, explosions tore through the base. Torin's team ran for cover as the building collapsed. The mission was a success. Back at headquarters, the news spread quickly. The Gralvan supply base was destroyed, their power weakened, but the victory was bittersweet. Torin was hurt. The heavy suit had taken its toll. His body ached, but his spirit remained strong. Mira helped him to rest. "You must be careful," she said softly. "You can't fight alone." Torin smiled faintly. "I am not alone. Earth fights with me." That night, Torin looked at the stars. The Gralvans watched from above, angry and confused. They did not expect one man to stand so strong. Some began to whisper, maybe Earth was not as weak as they thought. Torin's thoughts were clear. He would keep fighting, no matter the cost, because now he was the forgotten weapon, the last hope of a planet. The quiet hum of the drone's engines was barely noticeable as it floated high above the battlefield. From this small machine, a live video feed streamed across Earth and beyond. The footage showed something no one expected: A single human, clad in old but powerful armor, fighting with unmatched skill and strength. That man was Torin. The images spread quickly. On every screen across cities and towns, millions watched as Torin battled the Gralvan mercenaries. He moved like a force of nature, throwing enemies aside, dodging blasts, and striking with fierce determination. It was more than a fight. It was a message. The Gralvans themselves received the broadcast through their communication networks. Officers gathered in their ships, eyes fixed on the screen. The leader of the mercenaries, the High Commander Rask, sat in his dark chamber. His face was hidden behind a mask of cold metal, but his eyes narrowed as he watched. "This cannot be," he said quietly. "One human against all of us?" The other commanders murmured, disbelief spreading like wildfire. No soldier had ever fought with such power. The Gralvans were known for their strength, their weapons, and their numbers. But this human was different. "Send scouts," Rask ordered. "Find this warrior and destroy him before he inspires more." Meanwhile, on Earth, the broadcast became a symbol of hope. People gathered in homes and shelters, watching Torin's fight with wide eyes. Children whispered stories of the armored man who could take on an army alone. News anchors repeated the footage over and over, analyzing every move. Some scientists began to study the armor, wondering if it held secrets that could help the human race. In the command center, General Kieran stared at the screen. She turned to her officers. "We must protect him at all costs," she said. "He is more than a soldier now. He is our symbol." Torin, unaware of the growing fame, focused on the battle at hand. He moved through the city's ruins, following the drone's path. Every step was careful but confident. His suit showed scratches and dents, evidence of the fight, but it held strong. Torin knew he could not stop. The Gralvans were everywhere. Suddenly, a group of elite Gralvan soldiers appeared, their armor darker and more advanced. They surrounded Torin, weapons raised. "You are the one on the broadcasts," their leader said. "You will die now." Torin's voice was calm. "If you want to find me, come and try." The battle began. Torin dodged energy blasts, weaving. Between the soldiers with speed no one expected from a man his size. He struck hard, breaking weapons and knocking enemies down. The elite soldiers were skilled, but Torin's experience and armor gave him the edge. One by one, they fell. As the last soldier retreated, Torin looked up at the sky. The drone hovered nearby, recording everything. He spoke softly, but the words carried far beyond Earth. "Come get me." The phrase was simple, but it echoed across galaxies through the broadcast. Rask watched the message and clenched his fists. "This war will not be easy," he admitted, "but we will win. We must." Back on Earth, the broadcast had another effect. Alien races watching from afar were stunned. The Gralvans were feared throughout the universe, but this human showed a power no one expected. In quiet corners of distant worlds, warriors and leaders whispered stories of Earth's last hope. Some felt respect, others fear. Meanwhile, on Earth, Torin became a legend. His image was everywhere, in posters, stories, and songs. People no longer hid in fear. They stood tall. Soldiers in the field fought harder, inspired by the man who dared to face the impossible. At night, Torin returned to his workshop. The armor was heavy on his body, and the fight had taken its toll. Mira, the medic, was waiting. "You have become more than a soldier," she said gently. "You have become a symbol." Torin removed his helmet and looked at her. "I fight for my home," he said. "But I am tired. This armor and this war, it is heavy." Mira nodded. "You are not alone. We will stand with you." Outside, the stars shone brightly. The Gralvan fleet loomed in the darkness, ready to strike again. But the broadcast had changed the game. Earth was no longer just a weak planet. It was a place where one man had challenged an entire army and won. The future was uncertain. The war was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, hope burned bright. The Gralvans did not take defeat lightly. High Commander Rask was furious. One human, wearing old armor and fighting alone, had destroyed entire squads of his best soldiers. His pride wounded, Rask sent out his elite hunters, experienced warriors, strong and ruthless. They were called the Shadow Pack, a group feared across the galaxy for their skill and brutality. Their mission was simple: find Tauren, capture or kill him, and end the growing legend. The Shadow Pack landed in the forests near New Haven. Their ships were quiet, hidden by thick trees. The soldiers moved with precision, eyes sharp and weapons ready. They believed they would succeed easily, but they did not know Tauren. Tauren had learned to move like a ghost in these woods. He knew every path, every tree. His armor, though heavy, had been repaired and improved. He was ready. The first encounter was sudden. The Shadow Pack found Tauren's trail, a broken branch, a crushed bush, and followed it eagerly. Tauren waited. When the soldiers entered a small clearing, Tauren appeared. His armor glinted under the sun. He did not shout or warn them. He just moved. The fight was fierce and quick. Tauren struck with power, breaking weapons and sending soldiers flying. The Shadow Pack was skilled, but they were not prepared for his strength and speed. One by one, they fell or fled, leaving behind weapons and armor. The Gralvans were shocked. Their best hunters defeated by one man? It was unthinkable. Rask ordered more troops to join the hunt. He sent squads from different parts of the city, surrounding Tauren like wolves closing on prey. But Tauren was clever. He set traps in the forests and ruins, hidden pits, sharp wires, and clever distractions. The Gralvans walked into them again and again. Each failed attack lowered their morale. Soldiers whispered of the earth monster who could not be caught. Fear grew among them. In one desperate attempt, a large group of Gralvans surrounded a village where Tauren was seen. They believed they could capture him there. But Tauren was waiting. When the Gralvans marched into the village, Tauren struck from the shadows. He moved silently, attacking the soldiers one by one. His armor protected him, and his strength crushed enemies before they could react. The village became a battlefield, but when it ended, the Gralvans were in retreat. Many lay wounded or dead. Humans in the village cheered for Tauren. He was no longer just a man in armor, he was a shield for their lives. Back in the command center, General Kieran watched the reports and shook her head. "He is more than a weapon," she said. "He is a force." Tauren's victories were spreading hope, but also danger. The Gralvans were growing desperate and reckless. They unleashed new weapons, giant robots, machines built for destruction. These war machines had crushed armies before and could burn cities in seconds. Tauren faced them alone. In the ruins of a broken city, a huge robot stomped forward, firing deadly beams. Its metal body was thick and strong. The ground shook with every step. Tauren studied the machine carefully. His armor was strong, but not enough to stop such power. He needed a plan. Using his knowledge of the city's ruins, he led the robot through narrow streets and broken buildings. The robot was large and slow, easily trapped. Tauren dodged blasts and jumped over debris. He climbed to the top of a broken tower and waited. When the robot passed under, Tauren dropped a heavy metal beam onto its head. The machine staggered but kept moving. He ran to the robot's back and found a small opening, an access panel. With tools from his suit, he pried it open and slipped inside. Inside, the machine was filled with wires and metal. Tauren moved carefully, searching for the power core. When he found it, he attached a small explosive device. He set a timer and ran out just before the explosion. The blast was huge, sending fire and smoke into the sky. The robot fell, broken and silent. Torin was exhausted but alive. News of the robot's destruction spread quickly. The Gralvons were shaken. Their great weapon was defeated by one man. The war was turning. But Torin knew this was only a battle. Not the end. The Gralvons would come back stronger, and Torin would be ready. The sun had barely risen when the ground began to tremble beneath the city of New Haven. The air was thick with tension, a quiet before a storm that no one could ignore. Far above, in the dark reaches of space, the Gralvon fleet gathered once more. This time they brought their most terrible weapon, a war machine so large and powerful it had destroyed moons before. The enormous machine descended slowly toward Earth, its metal surface gleaming cold and cruel. Its steps shook the earth with every movement. Soldiers and civilians alike watched in horror as it moved closer, knowing the battle ahead would be unlike any they had faced. Inside the city, Torin stood silently, feeling the weight of his armor, and the weight of the moment. He had fought many battles, but this was something different. The war machine was a nightmare made real, and no one else could face it. General Kieran stood beside him, her face firm but filled with worry. "We cannot lose New Haven," she said softly. "If that machine destroys the city, the whole planet falls." Torin nodded. "I will stop it." With those words, he turned and walked toward the city gates, the heavy armor moving steadily. Mira, the medic, watched him go, hoping silently he would return. The war machine began its attack, firing beams that melted buildings and crushed streets beneath giant feet. Its armor was nearly impossible to pierce. Soldiers fired everything they had, but their weapons bounced harmlessly off its surface. Torin arrived at the battle, surrounded by chaos. The ground shook as the machine moved forward, and its beams tore through anything in its path. But Torin did not hesitate. He dodged blasts and debris, moving closer and closer to the giant enemy. His armor absorbed the heat and force, protecting him as he climbed the machine's leg. The war machine's sensors detected movement and tried to shake him off. It stomped and swung arms, but Torin held fast. Finally, he reached a small hatch. Using tools from his suit, he pried it open and slipped inside. Inside, the machine was dark and full of strange machines and blinking lights. Torin moved quickly, searching for the power core, the heart of the war machine. The core glowed brightly, surrounded by thick cables and heavy metal. Torin worked fast, planting a homemade bomb he had crafted from scraps and old technology. The timer was set. Torin ran toward the exit as the machine began to realize the danger. Alarms blared and lights flashed. He jumped out just before the explosion. The blast shook the city, sending flames and smoke high into the sky. The war machine collapsed, broken and silent. People cheered, their hope renewed. But Torin was hurt. His armor was cracked and his body was weak. Mira helped him to safety, her eyes full of relief. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved us all." Torin smiled faintly, but inside he knew the battle was far from over. The Gralvons would not give up. They would return stronger and more furious. That night, the city was quiet, but the tension remained. Torin sat alone, thinking about the fight and what was to come. Far above, the Gralvon High Commander Rask stared at the ruins of his machine. His pride was broken, but his will was not. "This is war," he said coldly. "We will crush them all." But in the hearts of Earth's people, a new strength was growing. Torin had shown them that even the greatest enemy could be defeated, and that was only the beginning. The morning sun rose over a city still scarred by war, but alive with hope. The Gralvon forces had gathered once more, ready for a final push. But something was different now. The fierce spirit of Earth's defenders burned brighter than ever. led by the man in old armor who had become a legend. Torin stood at the edge of the city, his armor battered but still strong. Around him, soldiers prepared for battle, their faces set with determination. They had seen what one man could do, and they believed they could win. High above, Gralvan ships hovered, their engines humming with power. But as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. One by one, the ships began to lift off. Gralvan's soldiers hurried to their ships, leaving behind weapons, machines, and even the bodies of their fallen comrades. The great war machines stood silent, unmanned. In the command center, General Kieran watched the retreat with surprise. "Why are they leaving?" she asked. An officer replied, "They're running." The Gralvans had been defeated, not just by weapons or numbers, but by the spirit of Earth's defenders. Torin's courage had shown the galaxy that humans were not weak. Stories spread quickly among the Gralvans. Their mercenary armies had never faced such resistance. One man, with nothing but old armor and fierce will, had broken their might. Torin did not celebrate. He knew the war was not truly over. The Gralvans might return one day, but for now, they were gone. He walked through the city streets where people cheered and helped rebuild. Children ran alongside him, their eyes wide with admiration. A young girl tugged his hand. "Will you stay and help us?" she asked. Torin knelt, smiling gently. "I will always be here when you need me," he said. That night, as the city lights flickered on, Torin slipped away. He walked into a quiet forest outside the city, the armor heavy on his shoulders but his heart light. He found a tall tree and carved a simple message into the bark. "Earth may look weak, but don't ever push it." As the wind rustled the leaves, Torin looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other worlds watched and waited. The legend of the man in armor would grow, a symbol of hope and strength for all who dared to stand against the darkness. Torin disappeared into the shadows, ready to protect his home whenever the time came. For now, Earth was free, but the story was far from over.